I'm Sean, you're watching Hacking Patina. This is the 58 DJ-3A Chromo. Let's address the raw steering. Well, I've got this fender off and I have access to it, and I'm waiting for the parts for the brakes to come in. What we're gonna see today, guys, is we're gonna use some Cornhead grease mixed with some GL4, create a little bit of a slurry in my $1 big box store, squeeze it in that opening. We're going to address the oil facing bolts, ultra black gasket maker. We made our own cork gasket for the raw steering plate. I've already got the plate off. I've already cleaned out the old nasty slimy whatever goop was in there. Cleaned that out late last night. Already have removed the dampening, steering dampener that often gets placed on these vintage Jeeps or four-wheel drive units to stabilize the steering. This is usually because the Ross box in these hasn't been serviced, hasn't been tweaked. We're going to adjust the sector shaft screw and try to get the play to minimal. We're not going to be taking out seals, replacing seals. We're not going to replace the shims in the worm drive to set those bearings. We're going to assume that stuff's okay. I haven't driven this enough to realize or not if it's going to be good or not. So I don't want to dig into it if I don't need to. The legendary raw steering. This steering box, this vintage steering box, was the industry standard on these Jeeps. For approximately 30 years was its longevity. Although the company itself, Ross Gear and Tool, was established in the early 1900s, this steering box, the cam and lever design found in here, the worm drive, the sector shaft, that really became an industry standard for World War II and into the early 70s, mainly because the durability and its slow speed and field work. It was just a really durable design for its time. It can be found in the MBs, the Ford GPWs, CJ-2As, CJ-3As, CJ-3Bs, early CJ-5s and CJ-6s, and obviously in the DJs, the DJ-3As, as we have here. So these guys have been around for quite a while. They've served their purpose, but we're going to address that today. So some of the components on this, guys, is here's your Pitman arm back here that has all the linkage up to your front steering. This is your sector shaft right here. Okay, this is a worm drive inside here, and basically this sector shaft has two pins that ride inside this worm drive. Okay, I don't know if you can see those pins, but they're pressed through on the other side, and it rides inside. You can see it rotating here. I'm not going to rotate it too much, but it rides inside, these pins ride inside the worm shaft. Okay, there's some shims inside this plate to set pressure on the bearings. There's an oil seal back here going to the Pitman arm. We're not going to replace. We're just going to get rid of the things that were a potential issue on the face of this, and then give it a little time and see where the leaks develop, or if there are any leaks. I'm sure there are, but I'm sure this rear seal leaks. We'll address that later after we kind of establish that. We're going to assume the shims are proper and the bearings are proper and good. You can kind of see the bearing in there, and there's a bearing up here. But we're going to just get the correct fluid in there, button this back up. We're going to get rid of the grease zert that was in this hole, the fill hole. Guys, don't leave grease zerts in these holes because Somebody who doesn't know might be sticking in regular grease that they use for their other fittings, and then you don't want grease in here. You want a gear oil, a GL4 gear oil, or you want to use something kind of more modern of a Cornhead grease to put in here. And depending on your climate, whether it's warm or cold, you can kind of add a little bit of GL4 gear oil, 80-90 weight, into that Cornhead and create a little bit of a slurry. Cornhead and GL4, at least the stuff I'm going to be using, is actually both mineral based, so they will chemically work together. They won't separate, they'll mix up nicely. Just pre-mix them into a bottle before you add it into there. That's what we're going to be working on today, guys. We're going to adjust. There's a screw here on the plate that allows you to tighten up this sector shaft up against that worm drive. See there, when the faceplate's off, you get play. So when the faceplate's on here and you have the adjusting screw, here's the adjusting screw. This nut is just the lock nut to hold that adjuster. So this will go through here, right? And it's going to put pressure on this sector shaft. You tighten it up to put pressure onto these pins, these two pins, onto that worm drive, and put the right amount of tension on there. I cleaned all this out. It had a sludge of some sorts in here. It was caked with grease. I'm sure something was leaking. I'm sure it was leaking through the bolt holes, especially this one right down here, guys. And they're all oil facing. So what do we do with oil facing bolts? Actually, this one's not oil facing. This one is. This one is. Oh, you can see I didn't get that part cleared out. You can see the slurry mix that was kind of in there before. Not too bad. It was caked in there. I wouldn't say it was horrible. Oil facing, oil facing. This one always leaks, guys, down here. Make sure you put a sealant, Permatex number 2 or Ultra Black oil resistant on your bolts before you put them in. Same with this one up here. You can reduce a lot of that leaking. We got rid of the old dampener. It's leaking fluids out of it. It's pretty much junk, guys. Hopefully we don't have to use this anymore. Let's go ahead and get the slurry mixed up. All right, so completely empty. These Ross steering boxes use about 10 to 12 ounces of this corn husk. And don't forget, we're gonna substitute 1 ounce of GL4. I'm using driven GL4 conventional, 80 weight, 80-90, to make my slurry. So probably about 2/3. You can't mix it in the Ross steering box. You got to pre-mix it. And there's probably a much better way of doing it than I'm currently doing it. Again, this is a mineral based, and so is the GL4. So they will mix properly together. So if you have a Ross steering box that you didn't replace the seals on, so it's not perfectly sealed, the recommendation is to go with the corn husk or the Cornhead. Corn husk. You know what I meant. Otherwise, you'll just leak out a gear oil. If you got a perfectly sealed, rebuilt Ross box, give a 80-90 weight or a 140 weight a shot in there. It'll usually leak out the Pitman arm. Well, that was a mess, but it is what it is. It is what it is. I'm gonna add about 1 ounce of GL4 in there and figure out how to stir it. Let's add about 1 ounce. GL4. Yep, right about there. You know what I do have? Right from my trash can. I have the old clutch cable. Look at that. That's going to be the perfect mixer. That is going to be the perfect mixer-upper. That's a good stir stick, guys. I have to keep that on the shelf. All right. Let's put that in there. Let's wipe it down. So there's the consistency of this. We'll see. I'll probably have leaks all over the place, or maybe not. Don't know. Don't know. But that's how we're doing it. That's how we are doing it. Don't use the grease zerks on those. Use plugs. So somebody doesn't think they need to be shoving in regular axle grease or bearing grease onto your Ross steering box, and you got some problems on your hands, okay? We got a light amount of Permatex on the gasket, very light layer. Bolt threads got some on there, especially that bottom one. Don't forget, pay a little special attention to this bottom one. That's the leaker right there. This does have a torque requirement of 15 to 20 foot-pounds. And remember, guys, you got steel bolts going into cast iron. They can strip easy. Let's put on the spectre shaft adjusting screw. Okay, I got a little pressure on there. Let's just hold it tight for there. Let's fill this up with my slurry. Now, the important part about this is make sure that you turn the steering shaft, that worm drive in there. Get that spectre shaft moving around. You don't want air pockets in here. So just fill it up a little bit. Move it around a little bit. You can put it up on racks if you want to make the steering adjust a little easier. It's dry in there. You can hear it's dry. We're just getting any air bubbles out. Go side to side, lock to lock. Might have her filled up. Let's give it one more side to side. All right. We'll check that again after a drive. Remember, this one had a grease zerk sitting on there. Okay? Don't use it. Somebody will make a mistake and fill it with grease. Bad idea. Use a plug. Use a plug. Now we're going to adjust this spectre shaft, this adjustment screw. It's going to put those two pins in that spectre shaft on that worm drive. Now the center of these worm drives have that little bit of play. Because most of the time, 90% of the time, you're driving straight. So on these old gearboxes, that center part of that worm could be worn out. We're hoping this one's not. We'll deal with that later down the road if it is, but we're hoping it's going to be just fine. So most of the wear from those pins, those two shafts that go into the worm drive and turn your Pitman arm, most of the wear is down in the middle. So we want to keep adjusting this over time for that wear. Otherwise you get all that play in your steering box because this never gets adjusted. So we're going to tighten this down just to the point to where we feel just a little bit of friction as we're coming off that turn, because that's going to be where you get the next part of that friction in your turn, right off that center, right when we're starting to make a turn on those wheels. So we're going to adjust that up. Okay, it's not perfect science. You don't want too much friction, you'll wear it out. And if you over tighten, your steering won't come back to straight automatically, and that's a big problem. That's even worse, okay? You always want it to come back to straight. I think I'm feeling pretty good about that there, guys. I think that'll work. Again, it's not science. Go by feel. I'm gonna take a little bit off that. Now to tighten that, use your 5/8. Hold your screw in place. Use your 5/8. Give that a nice snug. Okay. There is a torque spec for this. Then we're just gonna get her snug. Okay. All right. We got that raw steering done, guys. Just a quick filled service. Not an overhaul, quick fill service. We got good fluid back in there, that's taken care of. But I noticed when I was in here, we got some loose wires we need to deal with. This looks like it went to the oil sensor back here. So we got a hot line here. We got this open line here, which looks like it plugged into this brown. Not quite sure where that goes. And then we got this other brown that's open here. You can see that. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and tape these up. Tape this up because I'm gonna be replacing that oil sensor. I think. I don't know, I might see if that one works. We'll hook that one back up. What the heck? Well, that concludes getting that raw steering box serviced up. Getting it ready. Won't know the status until we take it for a drive, but it's time to enjoy some holidays. From my family to yours, I appreciate you watching. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, be safe. Until next time, we take care of those brakes.